Hey, welcome to Brighter Rays. So this week we're looking at Genesis chapter 44. We're going to look at the whole chapter. And I called this week's study Repaying Evil for Good. And you'll find out why as we go through it. If you already read the chapter, then you probably already know why it's called that. But let's begin with our introduction for the week. Now, the elders of our church, we get together, we talk all the time, and we were talking about, about this part of Joseph's life that we're going to go through. And, it's interesting as we get a lot of detail about what's going on. There's a lot of details about this portion of Joseph's life, but then you get to you go back to Methusela, who lived 969 years, and we don't even know anything that happened in his life. But for Joseph, you get these. It really just kind of it slows down. And really think about it, without Methuselah, the chain progression to Noah and beyond, it's broken. It doesn't happen. So, but yeah, we have, very few details about him. Wasn't he important? But we don't have that story. Well, with the telling of Joseph's story, we have a very dramatic slowdown in the storytelling. Where before we kind of, we traveled through time at breakneck speeds. We're going through generations. We're almost skipping them without even really talking about them. And we're just kind of pausing here and there, just long enough to catch a moment. Even Noah's story isn't really that long. I mean, it's a pretty short story. But in these last few chapters, with Jacob's house, with Jacob's book here, we get to know Joseph, one of his sons, very well. And he, how he is the one by which God moves Jacob and his family into Egypt. And he's not even the one through whom the Messiah will come, which is kind of interesting. It's Judah. But yet we have the slowdown of the story. Anyway, so we have the descendants of Israel. When this book was written, the descendants of Israel were waiting on the verge of Jordan, looking across to the promised land. When these books were finally delivered to the Israelites, Moses wrapped it up, and then he dies, and so they have these 5 books to carry with them into the land of Egypt, out of the land of Egypt into, and from the wilderness into Canaan. So they were, sojourners. They were sojourners for a long time in a land that was not theirs, and they would eventually become enslaved to Egypt. But miraculously, God had set his people free because of their disobedience, the people of that generation that was set free were not allowed to access the promised land. They were all banned. Definitely the males were. So their children would be the ones to receive the 5 books of Moses, and then those were the ones that were to carry them into their homeland. And how did the people end up here? How did the people end up, in the wilderness, outside the promised land? How did they end up there? Well, that's what were they supposed to do when they got in there? Once they crossed the Jordan, what was supposed to happen? Well, that's what the 5 books that they carried in their possession, that's what that was all about. So the reason why they had to return to Canaan as a family was because of what happens in the events with Joseph. The lessons learned by Joseph and Joseph's brothers would be a help to them. It would be a help to the righteous and a warning to the wicked, to show them how they should turn from their sin and turn to God. So it's far from being just a strange pause in the action of the stories that are happening in the book of Genesis. These stories actually point out the ultimate struggle between good and evil. Now, last time we left the brothers drinking and making merry with Joseph. The 12 were reunited and all seemed to be well. However, Joseph is still not convinced that his brothers have truly repented of their sin, and so he has one last test to try their hearts. They are sinners, like all humanity, but, have his brothers been changed by God? Are they different? Have they left behind the evil of their youth? Well, have they really sorrowed for their sin? Joseph, and we along with them, are about to find out. So this week, and we're going to take a look at first at verses 1 through 17, where we find the heart of what is going on when Judah declares that God has found out the guilt. And then in verses 18 through 34, we have the record of Judah's speech that he gives to Joseph as he requests that he stay instead of the boy. And so we're going to take a look at those two things this week. So come back next time and we'll begin our study in looking at this great chapter.